everybody, and welcome to the Pitch Perfect podcast. We are a flesh and blood podcast that aims to educate, empower, and support the female community in flesh and blood. We're your hosts. I'm Melody, kia ora, and this is Elaine.
Hi.
Hi. And today we're joined by Caroline and Haiyue. They're co-chairs of the Magic the Gathering League, which is called VML. So we're really excited to have you guys on. We've been meaning to have you guys on for quite a while now. Finally reached out, and we want to talk about the VML, insight into your experiences, the journey to date with VML, and also learnings that we can take and apply in our own space here in Flesh and Blood. So, first question is, tell us about yourselves and how did you get into TCGs?
So my name's Caroline. I got into magic specifically a long time ago. I mostly did it to try and find a group of friends that didn't just go out to bars and hang out every weekend. Actually, do something fun. And my wallet doesn't really thank me for discovering this, but my current friend group does, and I'm really happy with discovering magic.
Awesome.
Um, I'm Haiyue. I got into Magic 2017, so probably not as long ago as Caroline, but a few years ago now. And when I got into Magic, I just became really obsessed with the kind of the game, but also the high level stuff. Like I spent the first 3 months of Magic only watching Pro Tour broadcasts, even though I had no idea what was happening or going on. I was just really fascinated by the competitive players.
Awesome. So you guys are you both competitive players in Magic? I'm
I
seeing nods.
I try to be for sure.
Yes. The same way that we're competitive players, maybe.
Well, Hayu just won a tournament on the weekend, so I'm gonna say
Did
yes.
you?
To Hayu as well.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Oh, thanks. I just won a regional championship qualifier, which means I
Wow.
now get to play in the regional championships.
Love it.
But Caroline has played a couple of Pro Tours in her time, so she's very good.
Which, by the way, I love that we both call them pro tours, so that this isn't that confusing.
Right. We
Yeah, yeah.
understand. So there's at least some overlap in dialogue.
Yeah.
All
Cool.
right. So, first of all, we are a Flesh and Blood podcast, but we have you guys on today, Magic the Gathering, folks. A lot of people in Flesh and Blood came from Magic the Gathering, but just in case a lot of our listeners aren't familiar, let's discuss the origins of VML. So, take us a little through the genesis. When was the league established, and why?
So the league started in. We're gonna go with January 2020.
Okay.
Great time to
Awesome
start
year.
anything.
Yeah.
Wow. Sounds like our
FYI.
launch for Flesh and Blood during COVID.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We started in January 2020 with 24 players. It was essentially just 24 people that somehow tangentially knew each other. It actually came from the original organizer was a Hearthstone organizer, and he actually wanted to do something in the Magic space, and so created kind of just a copy paste of what he was doing in Hearthstone and brought it over to Magic. But he did make it specifically for players of marginalized genders, which is how Hayu and I got involved. We pretty much took it from there in season one. Season two, we grew a tiny little bit. And then in season three, we actually went to Wizards of the Coast, who makes magic, and said, hey, we are doing this thing. Can you help us out? And they did. They actually gave us not just some support financially, but they also gave us an invite to their online, because by the COVID has kind of sorted itself out in terms of magic and figured out what they're going to do in the online space. And they actually gave us an invite to their online version of a pro tour for season three, and actually all the way up until where we are now. And so from season three onwards, we grew up to 64 players and stuck with that style for everything up until this current season, which we're at 128 players. And just a tiny little summary, we essentially play or ask players to commit to a 10-week long round robin style league where you play one match a week on an online platform for Magic. And then we take the best X number of players and do like a single elimination playoff. And then the winners right now the winter system is a bit complicated, so I won't go into it. But it does feed directly into the organized play system of Magic,
Oh,
which is
wow.
kind of what we wanted. So yeah,
And so does that include,
Awesome.
so is there price support in your league
yep,
from VML, and then
Yep.
it plugs into Magic the Gatherings, the OP, and you get more
yep.
prizes?
So right
Yeah.
now, yeah, this season has a $7,000 prize pool,
Wow.
paying out. Ooh, testing me now. I want to say paying out to top 24.
Top
How
top 32.
top 32? Okay, nice. I
Yeah, I
designed it
think.
clearly.
Close.
Um, yeah, and I think up to 8 spots going to a regional qualifier,
Wow.
similar to what Haiyue
Oh
mentioned as well.
wow, awesome.
And we actually have a fun little bonus thing that hasn't happened, but we're going to take the next 3 seasons, and the best 8 players from each of those seasons are going to play like a little championship amongst all of the players. So there'll be a 24-person championship event next year. And the winners of those events will go to the PT, the actual pro tour, which
Uh,
is unusual, and we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah,
and so you,
that's really awesome that you're able to
sorry,
give
I was
away
just going to
like
ask
pro
how many
tour
leagues you
and
have a year. How many seasons? Are there 4 in a year? 3 in a year?
There's three that the current structure will be 3 seasons plus this gauntlet championship style event.
okay.
Okay. And is it pay to enter or free to enter? What's the commitment
We
from
have a ten
players?
dollar, yeah, we have a $10 entry fee, which is honestly just something that puts a little bit of a barrier so we don't get crazy flooded,
Mm,
but is really meant to just help support the league in a small way. Honestly, the barrier or the commitment is the time. we do
yes.
we
Yeah,
do need players to play all 7 weeks for our system to work. So
awesome.
Hi, anything from you? So why was it
Um,
established? Like, is it because well, clearly, it's male dominated, we know that. Um, but why in
well,
Magic?
in the beginning, I think we very much approached it from a competitive point of view, where in Magic, the at the time, and I think this is probably still relatively accurate now, maybe a little bit better, the player base generally among all the players, including casual and most every format, was about 35% female, 65% male. But if you
Pretty
go
good.
to a yeah, pretty good, right? But then
Mm,
if you go to a Grand Prix or if you went to the Pro Tour, that drops all the way down to maybe 5% or less.
mm,
And so, and Caroline and I both came from this competitive circuit where we knew a lot of great competitive players, and we wanted to show the world that we were just as good at Magic as everybody
yes.
else, and that there was space, and we belonged at the top tables. So that was kind of the original mission, I guess, of the VML, like as we conceived it back in season 1 and 2. But now that we're here and we've kind of seen a lot of our players graduate to not graduate, but they've played the VML, they've gone on to play at set championship, at pro tours, and also at other large events across both Europe and the US, and put up results in those tournaments. So we kind of feel like, okay, the competitive space, we are doing that mission well now. And now we're kind of broadening our view to realizing that even though in other areas there is better gender balance, people are still facing barriers to entry, whether you're going to your local game store for the first time, or whether you're going to a kitchen table game for the first time, or even, at any other point, there are always barriers that stop people of marginalized genders participating as much as cis men. And then so that's kind of a broader view now, is that we want to break down those barriers as much as possible wherever we can find them.
Love it. Love it so much. What about you, Elaine? This is the dream for us, is to create something just like this. Like, we have our podcast, but we talked a little bit before the show to Haiyue and Caroline about how much we want to create a league within flesh and blood, very similar. Side events or even online, there is talk of us and potentially the Rainbow Falls doing something. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, thank you for coming on because this is going to be great insight for us.
I say this is already really
Mm.
cool and interesting. Before we got started, we were sitting here talking, like explaining what a cold foil is, right? And how to like pitch. Like we there's no actual overlap in really the TCGs that we play, um, but I like hearing and seeing about how the TCG space is kind of the same throughout. So I think I'm
And we have
excited.
common
Anyway,
goals.
hmm so talking about gender diversity in the game, it is a fact, as Melody already mentioned, that this is a male-dominated space in TCGs. So how important do you feel it is to create a league targeted towards other genders, and why? We kind of just talked about this, but do you have anything else to add?
Um, I think that suddenly the way that I view it is that this space just didn't exist before.
Mm.
Mhm.
Like there were groups out there, there were Facebook groups, there were networks. Lady Planeswalker Society was one of them that had
Lady
existed
Planeswalker,
for
cool.
years. Yeah, that existed, I think, for quite a few years. Caroline, I think, is even the head of the Vancouver chapter.
I believe that
Maybe.
that happens somehow.
um, but then it was very informal, right? Like it was kind of these loose networks where people could meet each other, but there was no organized event or reason to compete in the same space. And we felt very much that it, having a place where people have the confidence and are comfortable to compete to the best of their ability without having to worry about all of the
Mm.
um, problems that they would face in other spaces is key to actually giving those people the ability to go from the VML to mixed spaces to mainstream events and retain that confidence that they have built up with us. Because when you're here, you don't have to worry about, oh, am I going to face this? Is somebody going to treat me
Mm.
differently across the table? Is someone going to assume I don't know the rules? Is someone going to talk down to me? Like, though all of those questions that are just, is there going to be a bathroom I can use? Like all of those questions that are just at the back of your mind when you go to a space, they're just non existent. And those questions affect performance, like regardless of whether, it's people recognize that or not. So by creating a space where you don't have to worry about any of that at all, we're giving people the ability to just work on their game and work on their building networks with other similar people and giving them the chance to just be as comfortable as men are in all the rest of the spaces.
Yeah, I mean every time you guys have talked so far, I'm just kind of like, yeah, exactly. That is what Melody
Yes,
and I are
we've
trying to do.
covered this in all of our podcasts. Every single thing you mentioned, bathrooms, the whole lot.
Bathrooms and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is a guy going to sit across from me and tell me how to play the game because he just assumes I don't know what I'm doing? Yeah. Hmm.
Yep. We always talk about how this is a you guys are on a podcast right now. Pitch Perfect is a podcast, but the whole reason we created it was to help create a platform and a safe space for women. Like where when I started playing locally, I'm in Charlotte now, but I used to play, and it was only when I started playing, I was the only woman, and I would go to ProQuest and Armories, and I was always the only woman there, and I would see that there were other women playing online. Melody being one of those, is how we became friends, just online. She lives in New Zealand. I'm here in the States. We've never met in person, but it's like we wanted to connect with more people that we could relate to. So we made this space to kind of attract that, and then we made a Discord, and everyone's in there now, and it's like there's this space, and we want to make a league like you guys have done. So just do you want to take us through some of the positive differences that you've experienced in your game space since you guys have established
Mm.
this league?
Well, positive. That means it's a Caroline question. um,
Yes.
yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. Well, I wanted to just share one really funny thing about finding someone like yourself that wanted to start, like between yourself, Melody, and Elaine. Haiyue and I are friends because I when I played Magic locally in Vancouver, Canada, and I knew practically every kind of non-cis man that played Magic, and Hayu showed up at a tournament, and I didn't know who she was, and I was like, "Well, this has to change." And so, fast forward a couple weeks, I ended up at a board game shop randomly that Hayu happened to work at, and I was like, "Well, this is my shot." And so I like legitimately felt like I was asking her out on a first date. I was like, "Hey, we're going to this board game cafe next door. Do you get off? What time do you get off work? Do you want to come hang out?" um,
And
and
Hayu's
like
like,
this,
is she
like
hitting on me?
is it was
It was
incredibly
it was
cringe.
50-50.
Um, but it legitimately did change our lives because she did not stand me up, in case you were wondering. She did come and play board games. We ended up going to a Grand Prix, which is a medium level Magic, used to be a big Magic thing. Um, and we went to a Grand Prix like the next week or something. Like I
Oh,
coordinated a
wow.
drive down for her. It just took off from there. And then of course we created some fun things together, including the VML. But all of it came from the fact that I was like, oh, this is someone in my community that I don't know is like me, and I need to fix that.
Yeah.
And so I relate to that a lot. In terms of positive things that we've done, recently, when we entered into season 8, we're kind of in our, almost at the end of our second year, third
Yeah.
year of doing this. I had to count there. And we ended up getting an advertisement inside the online client for Magic called Magic Arena.
Oh,
And so we got a pretty
wow.
simple advertisement that just linked to our website. And we got that at middle or late September. And that changed everything in terms of traffic and our Discord and our website hits and everything. Super great. It also changed how much negative comments we got.
Mm.
That is for sure. But my favorite part of that week, as much as that week was fairly stressful, there was a lot of random things happening that were not fun to read. Not every person, but some people that would join the Discord would write these short testimonial statements of like, hey, I've been playing Magic on Arena. I didn't know there were other people like me. This space is
Mhm.
amazing. Or this is so, just all these variations of these cool, I can't believe you exist statements. And so I actually legitimately go back and read these statements when things are not as
Tough.
positive.
Yeah.
um and that was a big highlight for me. That was a big moment because we started out just connecting with people that we knew, and then we grew to people that knew each other, so we went from 32 to 64 friends of friends essentially. And then we definitely we own and are active in the Twitter space in terms of Magic, but we've never been able to break out of reaching outside of Twitter essentially. And
Mhm.
so having that arena ad was huge for us, and showed how positive we are in this space. And then the small tiny little answer to that question is, my big thing, which I've well established even on this podcast, is that I like to talk to strangers to join my random thing. So I would go in Denver, where I'm currently, and I would go to Magic tournaments, and I would find the other women and the other players and say, hey, do you know of this thing that I do? And they'd be like, okay, cool, like weirdo, thanks. And then eventually they would join, and they'd be like, wait, this thing's actually really cool. You're not strange. This has actually happened like 3 or 4 times. There are
Oh,
people in
multiple
Denver.
times. Yeah.
But on the weekend, but just this past weekend, someone was playing, a woman was playing Magic next to me, and I heard her say to her opponent, hey, I've been playing a lot of standard because I'm in a standard online league. And I was like, excuse me, what's the name of the league that you're in? Because I was like, there can't be that many. And she's like, oh, it's called the VML. Have you heard of it? And I was like, well, I'm done. I no longer need to do anything in life because the thing that I advertise and yell at people about has suddenly been advertised back to me. So I feel like that was a big accomplishment for me
That's
as well.
awesome.
Yeah.
So
Any highlights
Uh,
for you, Hayu, or any positive differences?
Yeah, certainly. I think that for me, one of the greatest things that we've done is create networks. And this kind of comes back to what these gaming spaces, especially competitive gaming spaces, are like in mainstream tournaments, which is that if you look at the people who do well, certainly in Magic over the last several decades, and I'm sure in Flesh and Blood as well, um, there are going to be testing teams. There are groups of people who work together,
Yeah.
and by and large, those groups of people are male dominated. And by and large, acceptance into those networks is difficult if you're not already friends with them or whatever it is. So, and that I think that's a natural kind of thing that happens in networking. And what we've done in the VML is that we've created a lot of these networks for people to access that they've not had access to before, because a lot of people have raw talent, right? Like raw talent isn't
Mm.
all you need to succeed in a TCG. A lot of it is about bouncing ideas off other people who are better than you know, play testing, really like kind of getting into discussions and all of that stuff that you find in a support network that a lot of people were just on their own at home playing arena or going to tournaments, as you say, on your own. You're the only person there, and it's difficult to really make those improvements if you don't have that kind of support network. And I think that the the role of support networks has been very, I think, maybe not acknowledged as much in people's success stories when they get to the top end of these games. And the what something that I consider a huge success is that projects came out of the VML. So, for example, one of our uh, one of the great players in the VML called Aria, she's won, I think, almost as many seasons as Caroline has won.
Almost as many. Thank
Almost as
you.
many. And then she went on to play at Pro Tour level, and she went on to establish a testing team called Sanctum of All that is open invite to people of marginalized genders for the
Mm.
top level of competition. And they put up results, you know, in the Pro Tours. So it's very, that kind of network building to me is a huge positive that has come out of what we do, because that's the kind of thing that guarantees long-term success. And there's a
Yes.
lot of arguments to and fro always about things like giving invites to groups like ours or giving people, you know, special access to tournaments. And like we kind of agree in the sense that like an invite is not enough, right? Like an entry to the game is not enough to establish long-term representation and long-term success. But what does establish that is networks of people who are going to be able to work together and support each other through multiple iterations and multiple seasons of competitive play. So I'm very, very happy and proud of all the networks that have been built up by the players in the VML, and not just online, but like at tournaments, like across North American tournaments. Now people travel together, they, you know, stay in hotels together, they have meetups at events even when we are not there and stuff. So it's been fantastic to see that.
That's great. I'm just watching Elaine's cat.
I'm sorry, I'm being
Oh, me
attacked by
too.
a cat right now.
So cute.
He's he's very needy all the time. But that's really awesome. I mean, like listening to you guys talk, I feel like
Mm.
I said it after every question that you, but it's just kind of like what you guys have accomplished what we were trying to do on a much larger scale, which is just really inspiring. But I'm sure it was not easy because there's
No.
there there's always pushback, right? Challenging the status quo always comes with obstacles. So what do you think that like the biggest challenge with the VML and creating it, and just getting it to where you've gotten it now? What do you think the biggest challenge has been?
um I mean, we could talk about the plethora of challenges that we faced, you know, long as list as long as my arm. But I think that in general, we are very good at not really caring about what people think of us. Maybe that's a
Yeah.
bad way of putting it, but we believe in the mission. We know what we're doing is good for the community as a whole, and we don't really feel the need to justify ourselves to people who are, who maybe don't understand the
The
mission or don't understand the
naysayers.
need. The naysayers, because we just don't. It's A, it's not worth our time, and B, it's just
Mm,
um, it's not productive. And I think everything that we do is basically focused on what is the way to approach things that makes a positive difference and actually gets results. Um, so, like, when we've received pushback from either from the public or, in private, we, I think, are very, first of all, we're very good at picking our battles and not really just fighting over every tiny thing, because you can't fight over every tiny thing and you
mm,
shouldn't. Um, and also, the bigger picture is more important. Like, it's more important to develop relationships and cultivate them, and uh, kind of not really be nitpicky of every tiny thing. Although I am personally very nitpicky of every tiny thing, and Caroline has to rein me in a lot.
So
um,
just to add, I think one of the big parts is that a lot of the people that have issues are like to the two types of complaints we get is one letting us know that there aren't gender issues. I don't know if y'all knew this, but there aren't
oh
apparently.
no.
Never.
Yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
yeah,
that's a pretty common one.
non-existent.
Never.
Yeah, it's
Um,
totally, yeah. Now all solved. We can go home.
Hmm.
And then the other one is asking us to explain why we believe there are gender problems, and both of those people that are asking them are likely not the people we're trying to reach. So it's just not worth, like, we're not going to change their mind, and we don't need to change their mind because it's not who we're targeting. Like, it
Mm.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter. If you're asking that, it's because you haven't experienced it, and that's okay, but it's
Oh
not
no, where
who.
did she go? Oh,
Oh
she's back.
no,
No, no,
I came
nothing.
back.
Yeah, you're
Oh,
back. You're back.
it was so insightful too. But
it
anyway,
was great.
um
It was great.
yeah, essentially it's just not worth our effort because that's not who we're trying to reach. We're trying to reach the people that message us and say, oh my god, you exist, this is so awesome. That's the people
Yeah.
that we're trying to reach. So I would actually argue that our one of our toughest battles, Hayu, is a little different than what you answered. I think our biggest battle has been advertising, has been acknowledging
Mm.
that we exist. I mentioned this earlier, but we every game, every TCG, I'm sure, has a space. Magic Twitter is, it exists, and it's very popular. And I think we've done a decent job promoting ourselves in that. But that's a very tiny, as much as Magic Twitter will not admit this, it is a very tiny percentage of Magic players, like less than 1%. And so we, as much as we've grown a cool space there, we can't really reach any more players after that. So honestly, our biggest battle was trying to get that point across to people that could help us reach more people, which is how we ended up with the arena ad. But that was honestly my biggest struggle this last 3 years, was just trying to figure out how to reach more people.
Yeah. I think we are pretty lucky in that regard, Melody, because I mean Flesh and Blood is still pretty small. There's stop.
What?
Uh please
Yes, as you were
finish my
saying.
train of thought, Melody, because I'm being attacked. Um it's pretty small, and like Flesh and Blood Twitter is not Magic Twitter. Magic Twitter kind of
Oh,
scares
is it
me.
pleasant?
It is
Really,
pleasant.
it's
Very
very
wholesome.
it's very wholesome.
Maybe I'll go
Very
Oh
visit.
my
like
goodness.
Yeah,
the
come
most
visit. We'd
wholesome
love to
place
have you.
ever.
It's
We
wholesome.
Yes.
I,
Oh my gosh, you're taking everything. Yeah, no, it's very wholesome. And actually, LSS, I don't know if you guys are aware. Okay, everything is gone. I don't know what he did. I don't know if you guys are aware. LSS like had this gold. They we shredded a bunch of gold foils, and all of
You
Flesh and
might need
Blood
to give
Twitter was like,
context about
"Woo,
what a gold
yeah!"
foil is, because I don't think
Okay,
Caroline.
so they're like very very rare, expensive cards, right? That only go. They're like, you know, LSS like, all right, we're only gonna give out 10 gold foils ever, and they give out 10 gold foils, and then they post a video of them putting the rest of the gold foils that exist in the shredder. And these are like cards that, what, how much is a gold foil tunic, Melody? Like
6,000 US
$42,000 or
dollars.
something crazy?
Yeah.
Oh,
They're worth a
I'm
lot of
way
money.
off. Anyway, I'm gonna
Yeah, it
edit
depends on
that out.
depends on what the gold foil is. It's because of the rarity, but
Well,
you know,
the tunic. Let me see. Anyway, they're like very expensive cards, and they were like, "Well, we said we're only giving out this amount, so we're gonna go shred the rest of them." It's because keeping
Wow.
our product and keeping our
Wow.
market in check, right? And they did, and they posted a video of them shredding it, and Flesh and Blood Twitter was like, "Oh yeah, this is great."
mm.
Because they're doing what they said, and Magic Twitter like came after us.
Went
It was
crazy.
so, it was so scary. They went
What did we
crazy.
do? Why?
Oh no. Oh no. Ah.
Yeah, you guys, they like they
Oh.
blew up the post. Like they were attacking everyone who was in support of it. And it's just like, guys,
Wait,
we're
but we
whole
have the
like
we have the reserve
Res-
list. Like
yeah,
it's just the same thing.
it's just
I was,
creating reserve list. Like,
I was
That's
like,
ridiculous.
we are like wholesome over here, and like all friends. And Magic Twitter was really
Well,
scary.
I would like to hereby say that we do not represent Magic Twitter in any way, though we are both on Twitter. So,
I don't think
Okay,
anyone really represents Magic Twitter.
well, who knows?
it's
By the time this podcast comes out, Twitter might not exist anyway. So, like,
That's
Yeah, who
true.
knows?
who
That's
knows?
actually right.
all right. On eBay, it does say $42,000, but that's probably
Oh,
very inaccurate. But anyway, they're rare cards, right? Because the rest of them were shredded. Um, but yeah, no, come. You should check out Flesh and Blood Twitter sometime. It's very wholesome, and so Melody and I are really lucky in that regard. uh, Flesh and Blood Facebook is not always the same, but Flesh.
I want to ask
Okay,
my question
Melody, my
about
notes.
Wizards of the Coast. Can I ask my question about Wizards of the Coast?
Please do, because I gotta pull mine back up because the cat.
Oh, the cat just ruined
So
everything.
you
So,
go. Yeah.
we understand that Wizards of the Coast, for those that don't know who they are, well, it's Wizards of the Coast in Hasbro, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
The,
they're owned
the,
by Hasbro.
yeah, they're owned by Hasbro. The organization behind Magic the Gathering, and we understand that they sponsor the VML, which I think is very cool. We think is very cool. That's incredible. They are a gigantic company. So now there's probably some things that you may be contractually bound by. I'm not sure, but if you're able to divulge a little bit about the support that they provide for the VML, very interested to know. And also, how important do you think it is to have their backing, and why? Like, do you think it's made a difference to the success of the VML and the growth?
Um, yeah, so I actually kind of did summarize a little bit of how they sponsor us.
Mm.
Just in my origin story answers. So they did start. We started pestering them. I mean, talking to them in season 3 or season 2, and they did agree to sponsor us for season 3, and then we ended up extending that all the way up to where we are today in season 8 and beyond. In terms of sponsorship, they do help fund our prize support, and they also help us feed directly into their organized play system, which is huge.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
honestly, to answer your question, without that, like, we would still have the 32, even maybe even 64 friends that knew each other that would play. We would still have a league of some kind. I'm pretty sure of that. But we would not be where we are today. We would not be the organization that can be recognized just by saying, like, oh, you should go play in the VML, or the organization where I run into a stranger at a local Magic tournament who also is in the VML. Like, that would just not happen. We would not be on Arena. We would not be a name that people know, or we would not make it all the way over to the Flesh and Blood world and
Mm.
be something recognized there. So it is really key that they see the value that we bring, and they put their money where their mouth is, literally, and
Mm.
help us bring our value to the community.
yeah. And I think to add to that as well, like, it's very validating for the community at large to see Wizards of the Coast publicly sponsoring us, right? Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
putting our advert in the client was a big one. And like Caroline said, we got all of these messages saying we didn't never knew this existed and all of that stuff. But another kind of message that we got was just, wow, like it's so validating for people to see wizards openly stating, hey, we support this organization, we want people of marginalized genders to play our game. And that sounds like a very simple thing that everybody should do, but I think that um, it was still something that players didn't necessarily expect, or kind of, it took some people by surprise. And I think that was huge, not only for our organization and our community and the players that we have, but really just as a statement of, this is what we support in our player base. I
Mm.
think it was very valuable.
Yeah. So what do you guys like want the future of VML to look like? Where do you
It's like, how
see
much
Melody
awesomer
and I
could it
joked
be?
about?
Just world domination. Yeah.
Yep.
Gotta say that's what Melody and
Yes.
I throw around the term, world domination. I don't know if you all had this.
I don't know. Hi, what do you want?
Well, there's, okay, so in the short term, like right now, we have the league is great, and then the community itself, like I was talking about, we want to do more about breaking down barriers everywhere, not just in competitive play. So something that we're working on is friendly play slash casual play. That's something that Caroline and I don't have as much experience in, but we're trying to create more of a, like like weekly events or the similar for people to participate in, that are not just competitive, like they're maybe more focused on the fun formats. um so that's something that we're working on. And then another thing that we're working on is tabletop spaces. So we've been online only, partly because of the pandemic, of course, but also just as a result of the global nature of the player base, the online nature of it. That So something we did a few weeks ago, a month ago or so, is we actually had a physical space at Magic 30, which was this big convention style celebration of the 30th anniversary of Magic the Gathering. And we actually had we had like several tables, and we had, we called it a safe play space where everybody was welcome. It was not exclusive at all, but it was a place where people could feel comfortable. And we actually brought decks to lend out to people in the space. And it was just a huge success, and people, loved it and had a great experience there. So we that is something, an area that we're working on. We would love to do more in person kind of tabletop experiences, which I think, again, reaches a different audience to what we've been able to reach before.
I
Yeah.
saw some of those pictures too, like from the Magic. Is it called Magic 30? Is that what you called it? That you
Yeah,
guys put some pics on
it's celebrating
Twitter
the 30
and
years of.
yep. And it looked really cool of your guys' space. And I think was Haiyue, you were in one of the photos? Were you on any of them, Caroline? That were on Twitter?
Hayu, yeah, I was there, but I don't think Hayu tweeted any of my photos.
I
You had
saw a
access to the
couple.
Twitter. You could have tweeted your own photos. That's all I'm saying.
Someone gave you the keys for one weekend.
Awesome. So
That's
I'm very sorry to our guests and to our listeners. I have to jump out now, but Elaine's gonna carry the gauntlet and continue for the rest of the corridor. I have work, so I'm doing this during my lunch hour. But thank you so much for coming on, and we will definitely catch up again. Elaine and I would like to pick your brains a lot more, and it has been amazing having you guys on. Who says that TCGs can't hang out together? We're
yeah.
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 All right.
Thank you so much, Melody.
Bye. Bye, Melody. Um, so I think you touched on something pretty interesting, and like that's like I think the biggest difference between Flesh and Blood and Magic the Gathering right now is that I feel Magic the Gathering operates a lot online, and as far as like Flesh and Blood, there's no online client. It's all in person, and it's more. competitive play focus. And from my understanding as an outsider who doesn't know much about Magic the Gathering, just hears talk, right, about things that are happening in the TCG space. Magic's trying to get more back into competitive and bring they like brought back their pro tour and all of that, right? Is that am I just wrong in saying
No,
this?
no, no, no. That's definitely correct. There's just been a ebb and flow relationship with pro play over the past, not actually just specifically the pandemic. It actually was changing and flowing probably for the last 2 years before the pandemic as well. Magic has tried a variety of things. Essentially the whole, throw spaghetti against the wall and see if it sticks kind of styles. So
Yeah.
they actually really did try to get into the esports world, and they had these professional Magic players that they were paying a salary of a couple years ago. That they pivoted away from that. They pivoted more towards an online structure of things like set championships, which is what we essentially are calling pro tours, but they were specifically called set championships, and they were online. And then now that I guess I can't say if that did or didn't work. But now that we are getting back to tabletop in general, and people are going out to events again, they're kind of trying another concept, and this is a little bit closer to the original kind of pro tour. It's actually where I want to believe that Flesh and Blood got the name pro tour from. It had to have come from Magic, at least in some way. And so this new system does kind of go back to that. But it introduces a little bit more of a ladder system. So there's local events that you can play that lead up to regional events. So in fact, there was a regional event in Atlanta at DreamHack this past weekend, and then that will lead up into this big pro tour event, which will be there kind of 3 times a year, and then the fourth event
Yeah.
of the year will be a worlds event. And so they are getting back into it, but I will say that they didn't leave it in the sense, like, Magic has always had a pro play system. They are
Yeah.
just in the middle of figuring out which one works best for their current vision of Magic.
Yeah. I mean, Magic has just been around for so long. I feel like they now have the liberty to kind of play around with their pro system, and at least from an outsider, that seems to be part of it. But also, I really don't know what I'm talking about. So let's move on. So, Flesh and Blood is the new TCG on the block, right? We just celebrated our 3-year anniversary last month, I want to say, but time flies by, so it might have been the month before, but I think it was last month in October. And despite being so young in TCG years, right? We're only 3 years old. There's definitely a need for communities like VML to be present in our space, right? I'll be very candid. Like Melody, I never heard of VML, and then we had Yuki Bender, who is a very talented Flesh and Blood player. She took down Canadian nationals out of nowhere and has not stopped since. We had her
Oh,
on the
I know
podcast.
Yuki.
Yeah, she has a
Yeah.
magic background, and she was
Yeah.
like, "You guys, like, I love what you guys are doing. You guys gotta get like do something like VML." So like that was the first time we really heard about VML, and then other people as we started to build our own community. It was just kind of like echoed throughout by tons of people who were in our community being like, this has potential to be like VML, like do research on VML, um, all this kind of great stuff. So everything that you guys are doing is everything that Melody and I want to do and are passionate about. So what
Uh,
advice do you guys have for creating Flesh and Blood tournaments to uplift marginalized genders? Like advice just from your experience doing it in Magic that we could apply to our own TCG space.
that's a good question. um, and I think the the most important thing is to just do it. I know that sounds terrible. Like that just sounds like a cop out answer. But I think that stuff like this has been talked about for a long time, and people always talk about what we can do and what, you know, is to be done. But like the the most important thing is that it doesn't matter if it's small. It doesn't matter if it starts, you know, very like it's not perfect. It's not exactly what you've imagined in your mind for it to be, to end up being. But if you have like a small dedicated team and you kind of work hard at it and you just kind of create something, you can always build on it and you can always iterate on it in the future.
Yeah.
Don't like set yourself this idea of, oh, it has to be exactly like what something is now,
Yeah.
or you know, where you want to be, because like Caroline said, like when we started it was so such a ramshackle operation where like just 24 people that kind of knew each other. We had a weekly broadcast that was so like very basic, and you know, our producer on our stream had never produced anything before and just learned with us, but now the you know, now the broadcasts are great. um but it's really just like having the willingness to try something and then to try it again and to just keep pushing.
Yeah. I guess, like, looking back, is there anything that you guys would have done differently when building this space?
Hmm. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because we actually did, the structure came from a different game, right? Like the
Uh-huh.
guy who did it had a Hearthstone league, and he just copy pasted it and said this is now going to be a Magic thing. And I don't know, we would not have done that naturally. Like I have never thought about a round robin style league, and so I don't know if I want to live in a world where that wasn't the starting point, because it's become a pretty big part of our kind of structure and our identity. And I kind of love that it's not this single standalone one day event,
Hmm.
because I think that that space exists in many other ways. We've actually tried running those style events and they just don't get the same interest. And so we've found a space that works for us. And one of the things I love about our round robin style league is that you can play your match at any point of the during a time period, so it's a week long structure, which means that you can have people like from New Zealand play on their own time and match up. I actually just heard a story of someone who played their match at 4 a.m. um, against their opponent because they worked night shifts and their opponent worked early morning day shifts, and they were both available at exactly 4 a.m. in the mountain time. And
Yeah.
so they played, and that worked for them. That was not, you know, neither were upset. They were both very happy that that was the alignment time. And I find that fascinating that that's not something that exists. And I don't know if we would have gotten there on our own, but who knows? We might have come up with something, you know, equally as cool. But I enjoy our origin story. I enjoy that we came this, you know, structure that we didn't have before. I have never heard of. I would never have thought about, and so I don't know. I don't know if I would have changed that much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, there've definitely been challenges along the way. And something that we do a lot is that we listen to the people in our community and we listen to feedback. For the first for the first six or so seasons, we would have a survey afterwards, like a feedback survey, and we would genuinely listen to what people's put in them and kind of work on improving things. And kind of going back to what Caroline said, like the part of the reason for the success is that people who are marginalized generally are marginalized in more ways than one. So generally they'll have less time to do weekend activities, or they'll have less ability to commit to a Sunday 9 round Swiss event, or whatever it is. And having a structure that allows those people access to play was very important, for sure.
Yeah. That's what, um like, I kind of already mentioned this, but like that's one of the difficult things about I love the mission of Flesh and Blood, you know. It's created to play in the flesh and blood, right? That's why they don't have an online client. That's you know, the game's called that. But it does kind of make it hard for people do. leagues, right? Online leagues where you can go play on webcam, on TTS Tabletop Simulator, on Talishar, which is like a fan made um, online platform where you can play Flesh and Blood. You can there are online leagues where you can do this, but because you're not actually like gaining any XP or any like credit from Legend Story Studios, like sometimes people just don't want to commit the time. Like I've done a few online leagues because I went and I like stayed in the I like went through a Thoreau era, as I called it. I went and stayed in the woods by myself for like a few weeks just to like get away from life one time, and so I did like online leagues just so I didn't miss Flesh and Blood too much. But that's like the only time I've done it because why do when I can go play in person at armories and get XP for it. So that's kind of like an obstacle we're trying to overcome right now. But I think we can move on to some listener questions. And our first listener question comes from Kiki. Kiki is an amazing person. They run the Rainbow Foil Discord, which I mentioned earlier. So they're really supportive and aware of you guys. And they said, how do you deal with criticism from non marginalized folks about being excluded from an event that focuses on marginalized gender? Which you guys kind of touched on that, but if you have anything you want to add or reiterate, feel free.
I mean, yeah, the answer was really mostly we don't. We just don't engage with that unless it is potentially in an constructive way. But honestly, even that, we really try to focus on our goal, which is to be positive at a positive place for marginalized genders, which is not usually the people that are asking us those questions. um,
Yeah.
and just yeah, the main fact is we know. I don't know. We can be a little I don't know, overconfident. We know that what we're doing is working, and we don't need to justify that to people in a very un polite way to say it. I guess we just don't need to because we know it is working.
Yeah,
Uh,
I completely agree with that. It's never it's never the marginalized people that ask you to justify why you need this space, and we don't accept the assumption that if you're a cis man, you are deserving of answers to these questions from us because we're already putting in a lot of work. But I will say that the thing that really drives it for me is that marginalized folk are excluded from every other space, whether directly or indirectly. This is the one space they're not excluded from. And we're giving them the tools and the ability to break into those other spaces and reduce that exclusion that they already feel.
Right. There's just a lot of even like unintentional exclusion that I don't think people understand. Like walking into a tournament and not seeing a single, just seeing a bunch of like cis men and not seeing a single other person who looks like you or uh yeah, representation's important. Honestly, like
um,
that it kind of um
Well, the big thing for me, an example of that is walking into a LGS and you're standing in line with five people, four cis men, and when they get to the front of the line, each the store owner, store person says, "Okay, like here, are you registered? Are you here to register for the event?" But when they get to you, they're like, "Oh, what would you like to buy?" And it's like,
yeah,
I'm sorry, what? like,
yeah.
like it's really tiny little things like that that add up. That become less little is an example of that for sure.
I was on a competitive team for Flesh and Blood before I moved away. And so when I traveled, I was the only woman on the team. Um, I loved everyone I was on the team with. And we would travel to events together and play as a team, um, travel as a team. But if like we weren't in our jerseys, there was always this weird sometimes disconnect where we'd walk into the store and like you said we walk in as a group and they're like, oh, here's there's five of us. They're like, here's four deck lists. How can I help you? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I also need one.
Yeah.
Hello. Like I like one time someone was like, "Oh, cool, like you brought your girlfriend to come watch?" And I was like,
Ooh.
Oh
"No,
no.
no, I'm a player on the team here to play also." And like there's also been experiences where you go and there's a like the only bathroom in the store is labeled like men's. And I'm like, "Why would you not just put
Eh.
bathroom?" Like, yeah, so I understand where we're coming from. All right, our next listener question is from Dr. Unks. I think that's how you say it. And Dr. Unks says, considering what it has taken to get Magic to be more gender diverse in its 30 years, what can Flesh and Blood players of all genders do in its early years to be more inclusive and encourage more gender diversity as the game grows? Aside from the obvious, don't be an asshole. So,
So for me, it's there's everything, lots of things that everybody can do, but it's not something like here is gender exclusion, we're gonna solve it. It's like the everybody, if you think about it like that, is very overwhelming, and I think people get put off by this idea that it's this huge societal problem that we can't deal with. For me, it's about breaking it down into like just when you like just the small things that you can do. The first one is acting in good faith. Like that is, I think, the most important thing is to make sure that when you're doing something, you're listening to the people who it's affecting, and even if you're not marginalized yourself, like making sure that you believe people when they say something, and then kind of do the thing that they say will help them and not assuming what you should do. I think that's like the kind of overarching principle.
yeah,
And often it doesn't really have to be like you have to do anything special treatment or you have to, be specifically one thing or another. It's about not making us feel alone. So if somebody is in your group is, maybe not acting in a way that's very inclusive, you can just speak up, like just say something. You don't have to argue with them, you don't have to fight them, and just be like, hey, that's not cool, or just something that indicates to the people who are around you who might be marginalized that they're not on their own. That's
right.
very, very helpful, I think. Like I always think about very, very small things that helped me. So for example, um, there was a guy at my first local game store that I played with, and there was a mixture, I would say, of people in that store who were supportive or not supportive. But there's this one person who very early on in my Magic playing career spotted that I was pretty good at the game, and he said, "Hey, I think you're pretty good, and I think that you should maybe go to a GP." And that was like that just opened up a world like of possibilities that I didn't even think about existing for me as a Magic player. So it's just like very, very small things. Or the one time, Caroline, do you remember the judge? um, at a judge at a Grand Prix, if like that Zyla asked said, "I just need time to go to the bathroom," and they just said, they just didn't ask questions and just accept. Caroline tells this story much better than I do, but just small actions like just believing people and just letting
My friend
being
had
accommodating.
a let's call it a clothing mishap,
Mhm.
and she needed help fixing it. And the round was starting, and so we just ran up to the judge, and we're both laughing because it is a very funny thing to have happen. And she explained, she's like, "I have to go to the bathroom and fix something, and she has to help me." And then we both ran away, and the judge was like, "Okay,"
Okay.
instead of having to explain what had happened. So it was, yeah, that definitely makes a big difference.
Yeah. Um, I had a similar judge experience that was that very much made a big difference. Makes you a lot more comfortable at tournaments. And I also had a similar kind of, I guess, experience to you, Hayu, where I was playing a game at a tournament and my opponent was just being a little bit like over over explaining more than he would to anyone else in the room. Uh just being like, "Well, this is how this works," where it's like I'm sitting here playing you, like undefeated in the fifth round. I obviously know how this game works, right? So
Yeah.
and he's sitting there, he's just going, and then the one of my friends sitting next to me playing a game, he said he just interrupted. He said, "Hey, if she has a question, she'll ask. Play the game." And like it was just kind of like it just felt good being like, "Thank you, like thanks." I could have said that myself, and I didn't say it myself, but like it just felt nice, to for someone to call it out and just feel like you're not alone and people have your back. 'Cause you don't even have to be rude about it. You just be like, "Hey." Um, all right, Dr. Unks asked one more question, and then I think we'll wrap it up. He says, "From what I can see, fab players have been very kind and welcoming to new players of all kinds, yet it's still disproportionately male players, male dominated. What do you think that LSS, Legend Story Studios, can do as a company? Anything?"
Well, that's easy. Sponsor a VML equivalent series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um, just hand over the money, let them do it. It works. End of story.
Sweet. I'll accept that answer.
You can send a sound clip just straight in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
LSS, if you're listening.
um yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of things up and down that you can talk about, like how they interact with their game store network, how they, whether they have kind of codes of conduct and stuff like that, that they have guidelines for the stores that run Flesh and Blood. Stuff like that is welcoming, but really it's like, put your money where your mouth is. um be open, be like positively say, hey, we want this to happen, we want more diversity, we want to support these projects or etc. And don't play both sides by kind of, oh, we'll print some cards with women on, but we'll sit on the fence about things like it. That's not helpful. Just be open and be forthcoming and just kind of get on with it.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, before we end all of our podcasts, we always ask our guests this same question, which is there any topics or content that you would like to see us talk about on Pitch Perfect in the future? But because we are from different TCG spaces, I don't want to ask you guys. I don't want to assume that you guys know anything about what topics and contents are usually talked about in the Flesh and Blood content space. But are there any topics that you think are like important to discuss in TCG spaces in regards to gender diversity that maybe Melody and I could do an episode on? Just off the top of your head. If there's not,
Um,
fine.
one one topic that I've done on previous podcasts are just like a guide to an in-person tournament, but you can color it in the terms of gender diversity. So what does that mean? So for example, you're a team of 5, you're traveling around, one woman, do you have to get your own hotel room? What does that look like? What are
Yeah.
those struggles? What do you have to bring that maybe other people don't bring? um, just like we've just done the basic, like, what is in your backpack style um, kind of bit. But that's like a space where, since Flesh and Blood is all about the in-person events, like, what does it look like to prepare and go to an in-person Flesh and Blood tournament?
Awesome.
But maybe with the gender diversity part.
Yeah, that's a really good answer and one that we haven't gotten before. So
I look forward to an episode announcing your upcoming uh, league in Flesh and Blood that
thank
is for people of marginalized genders and opens up the space.
I also look forward to that, Hayu. So uh, I'm excited. We got fun things in the works. But anyway, that's all we have for you guys today. Thank y'all both so much for being on the show. This has truly been a joy and an episode that I'll be very proud of. I'm glad that um my community in Flesh and Blood has connected me and Melody to you guys, because I think that this is a great relationship. Great that we can kind of talk across TCGs about these universal, I don't want to say struggles, but barriers that marginalized gender groups face. So yeah, this has been really great. I'll give you guys the opportunity to plug yourselves if you would like. Tell everyone where they can find more about VML, and you guys are just whatever you want to plug. Go ahead.
So you can find VML at on Twitter at VMLMTG. We're actually on a lot of things at VMLMTG. So we have a Twitch, we have a YouTube, we have a website, VMLMTG.com, and of course Twitter. Those are. We also have a Discord. There's a link inside of our on our website, direct link. And you do have to be a player of marginalized gender to join, but you don't have to necessarily play Magic. Just saying, maybe we'll make a little Flesh and Blood corner. Who knows? um,
I'm
and then
open to it.
myself, you can find me on Twitter at Mighty Linguini, MIGHTY, and
Solid.
that's basically it. So.
Um, yeah, check out the BML. Check out the BML broadcast specifically because we're in the middle of season 8 right now. We're on Fridays, 6 p.m. Pacific. And it's like kind of feature matches from the week's action, and we have very good, very high quality production and casting. So that's something that I want to plug a lot because I think that the broadcast is great and it's very very fun vibe. We do a lot of the analysis stuff, but we also do like it's really really friendly and welcoming community. So I would definitely urge people to check that out. And as for me, I'm Haiyue. You can find me on Twitter at Nifet, Nipht. Oh my god, Niphettee. And I'm just generally hanging around. I do a lot of tournament casting outside of VML. I have a few other hats as well in Magic, but yeah, come and say hi to me and connect.
Well, I want more people to add me on Flesh and Blood Twitter, so that I
Yes.
can
Oh
see
yeah,
all
we
the.
want to. We can look see all the wholesome stuff.
Yeah, I want
Yeah.
to see all the wholesome stuff.
It is like it's like very wholesome. Like everyone is just friends, and it's very wholesome. I can't even think of like a single instance where it wasn't just a big wholesome family. Like it's gotten to the point everyone just kind of knows each other, and like when we have pro tours and stuff, it's more of like a giant family reunion, like a giant Twitter family reunion. Anyway, it's great. We love it. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us this week and coming on the podcast, and thank you for all of our listeners. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.